Fake HOA cops pulled a gun thinking they ran the streets, not knowing the real cops were already watching the tape roll. Big Shaq wasn't just watering his lawn. Big Shaq was laying a trap. They came with fake power and triggered a real reckoning. This ain't a warning, it's the beginning of the end for the system that sent them. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. He was just watering his front lawn like always. Shaquille O'Neal, 7 feet of peace and patience, when the golf cart rolled in like it owned the block. It wasn't unusual to see HOA patrols rolling by in the gated community of Willow Creek Estates. But this wasn't the old familiar green golf cart driven by Mr. Hendricks, with the limp and the oversized straw hat. This one was different. Shiny white with flashing amber lights, and 2 men sitting stiffly in crisp polo shirts, dark sunglasses hiding their eyes. No nods, no waves, just slow scrutiny as they passed each house. Shaq noticed them before they noticed him. He stood in his driveway, holding a green garden hose like it was an extension of his arm. His grass, like always, was immaculate. He still believed in Sunday morning lawns and front porch talk. That was who he was. He'd played in arenas that held 20,000 people. But he cherished quiet now, the kind where you know your neighbor's dogs by name, and your mailman knows your birthday. But something had shifted. The men in the cart gave a glance his way. Not the kind that said, "Hey, big fan," or even "nice to see you." No, this one lingered, calculated. They paused in front of the Lewis house 2 doors down. An older black couple, retired school teachers. One of the men got out, walked up to the porch, taped something to the door, a notice. Then they pulled away. Shaq kept watering, but his mind was already moving. Over the past few weeks there'd been whispers, notes left on doors, about lawn lengths, holiday decor rules, fines for noise that never existed, and more than once, Shaq had noticed a pattern. The warnings didn't hit every house, they hit specific ones, quiet ones, black ones. He wasn't trying to be paranoid. But facts were facts. Later that afternoon, he walked to his mailbox and found an envelope from the HOA, addressed to Mr. O'Neal. It wasn't formal, no logo, just typed. Inside was a reminder about his non-compliant trash bin storage. It made him laugh a little. His bins were always tucked behind the fence. Same spot since he moved in. He looked around, 3 houses on his street had theirs out. None of them got letters. He folded the paper carefully, walked inside, and set it on the kitchen counter beside a stack of untouched mail. Lucille, his mother, was stirring a pot of gumbo. She looked up at him without a word, eyes sharp. "They dropped off a note," Shaq said casually. She wiped her hands on a towel. "Trash bins again?" Shaq nodded. She didn't say anything for a while, just stirred. Then softly, like it wasn't meant to land hard, she said, "Don't let them steal your peace." He smiled. "They can try." But that night, he didn't sleep well. The next morning, while walking his dog, Duke, around the block, he noticed the Harper house had another notice on their door. Then the Jeffersons, but not the Martins, not the Allens. Folks who had American flags out front and smiled with the same edge of judgment he remembered from certain locker rooms in certain cities. Delia Harper was a widow, sharp-tongued, white-haired, and barely 5 feet tall. When Shaq walked by, she opened her front window like she'd been waiting. "They're not real," she called out. He paused. "Who?" "The ones in the golf cart," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Not official. The HOA doesn't know them. I called. They said they'd get back to me. That was 2 weeks ago." Shaq frowned. "You sure?" "Sure as rain," she said. "And they only give warnings to people who look like you." He didn't respond, just kept walking. But her words followed him all the way home. He spent the next few days observing. No confrontation, just watch. The men in the white cart came twice more that week. Always stopping at certain homes. Always bypassing others. Sometimes, they took photos. Once, they circled back to his place and just sat there for a full minute before driving off. Shawnee noticed it too. She watched from the upstairs window one morning and said, "They've been here 3 times in 2 days." "Just watching," Shaq said. "That's not normal," she replied, arms crossed. "They don't scare you?" "No," he said. "But they're looking for something." The unease grew when his daughter, Mamara, told him that 2 of her friends' families were thinking of moving out. "They said the vibe's different now," she explained over breakfast. Like, unwelcome. Shaq felt something stir in his chest. A slow, burning kind of anger. The kind he'd learned to manage, with breath control and weighted words. He made a call to a man he knew, old friend from the sheriff's department, asked him to run a quick check on the HOA's official personnel registry. The answer came back in a text. No names match. They're not listed. It confirmed what Delia had said. Still, Shaq didn't go public. He didn't confront. He didn't yell. That wasn't his way. Instead, he started walking his street more, talking to neighbors, asking questions casually. Most were nervous. Some whispered back their concerns. One woman, a nurse named Lacey, told him she was fined $150 for unsightly decorations, a wind chime and a hanging plant. Shaq asked what she did about it. I paid it, she said. They threatened more. Others had similar stories. A fine here, a warning there, always vague, always unchallengeable. One afternoon, Shaq saw the white cart slow roll by, as he stood talking to Lacey near her mailbox. The driver didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared. The passenger jotted something down. They watching you, Lacey muttered. Let them, Shaq replied. When he walked back inside that day, Lucille was waiting with arms folded. You need to be careful, son, she said. Big name or not, folks like that don't care who you are. Shaq sat down heavily. I know. Then why haven't you done anything yet? I'm trying to see the whole picture, he said. If I move too fast, they vanish. I want to know what they're doing, and why. Lucille nodded slowly. Don't let it get too late. That night, Shaq opened a blank notebook and began jotting down dates, times, addresses, and encounters. He wasn't just tracking them now, he was building a timeline. A pattern. He knew how to play long-game chess, the kind that required patience and pressure. A few days later, Delia knocked on his door. She held up a thumb drive. You need to see this, she said. Inside were weeks of footage. Her cameras, hidden in planters, windowsills, birdhouses, had been watching everything. They watched as the men left warnings on doors, skipped certain homes, harassed a teenager for skateboarding near a cul-de-sac. They watched as one of them reached into his waistband when a man in gym clothes asked them for ID. Shaq watched the clips in silence, then played them again. They think nobody's paying attention, Delia said. They think fear will keep folks quiet. Shaq turned to her. You mind if I make a copy of this? She smiled. I made 5. Just in case. That night, Shaq sat on the porch as the sun dipped low over Willow Creek. He waved at every car, every jogger, every neighbor passing by. The white golf cart didn't show, but he knew it would. We answered directly to the Internal Security Committee. The man responded quickly, too quickly. Shaq's eyes narrowed. And who's on that? They didn't answer. Kid. Shaq turned to the boy. You good? The boy nodded, jaw tight. Head home. I'll walk you halfway. The men didn't stop him, didn't say another word, just watched as Shaq and the boy walked past, silent as statues in their white golf cart that hadn't moved an inch. As they reached the third mailbox down, the boy spoke without looking up. Thank you. You don't gotta thank me, Shaq said. You okay? The boy nodded again, but his eyes were glassy. They scared me. I didn't even do anything. You don't have to do anything, Shaq said gently. Sometimes being you is all it takes for people like that to act like they own the rules. The boy mumbled his address and peeled off toward a small yellow house tucked behind a garden of wind chimes and potted succulents. Shaq watched until he made it to the door. No wave. No look back. He stood there for a long time after. When he got home, Shawnee was sitting on the edge of the couch, brows furrowed. She'd seen it all from the window. So had Lucille, who emerged from the hallway with arms folded across her chest, a gesture Shaq knew well. That boy looked like he was ready to cry. Lucille said, And those men? They got no business being here. I know, Shaq replied. They're pushing limits now, testing the waters. Shawnee pulled out her laptop and started searching the HOA bylaws online. She scrolled fast, lips moving as she read. There's no mention of a safety enforcement committee, she said. Not one. Shaq leaned over and pointed at a paragraph she missed. But they can create subcommittees without homeowner votes, if they call it temporary. Lucille let out a soft scoff. Temporary like termites. Once they're in, they don't leave. That night, Shaq did what he always did when something didn't sit right. He walked, slow laps around the neighborhood. He didn't carry anything, not even his phone. Just walked, eyes open, listening. Some houses were already dark. Others glowed blue from TVs inside. He passed the Simmons place quiet, curtains drawn. Then the Hales light jazz spilling through an open window. Then around the corner he saw the white cart again, parked behind a row of hedges like it was hiding. He didn't stop, just clocked it. Next morning he showed up at the HOA clubhouse. Normally meetings were monthly. This wasn't one, but he knew that didn't mean nothing was happening. He walked in, nodded at the front desk woman, and asked to speak with anyone from the board. The woman blinked. "They're not in today, Mr. O'Neal." Shaq leaned in just slightly. "I saw the white golf cart again last night. The one with no markings." She swallowed hard. I think that's from the safety task group. They've been active lately." "Who authorized it?" he asked. Her eyes darted. "I'm not sure. I think Mr. Riley might have mentioned it." "Is Mr. Riley on the board?" "No," she admitted. "But he's a regular contributor. He volunteers on events." Shaq exhaled. Slow. "You got a list of volunteers?" She hesitated. "I can ask the board to forward one." "I'd appreciate that," Shaq said. "I'll wait for it." Later that day he got a call from a number he didn't recognize. It was a man claiming to be the chair of the Neighborhood Safety Advisory Group. Said he'd heard Shaq was asking questions and wanted to clear up misunderstandings. Said their job was purely visual observation. No enforcement. Said the confrontation with the boy was a misread situation. Shaq didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He just listened. "Appreciate the call," Shaq said. "But next time you see something suspicious, maybe ask questions before accusing people." The man paused. "Of course. Our guys were just trying to keep the community safe." Shaq replied flatly. "From what?" Click. The silence that followed felt louder than any speech. That evening, Delia Harper called. She'd been reviewing more footage and noticed something strange. The men had started coming earlier, before sunrise, creeping past homes like shadows, sometimes just driving in slow loops with radios to their mouths. Shaq came by that night and watched one of the clips. In it, the men stopped in front of a house where a family had moved in just 2 weeks ago. The family was black. No cars parked wrong, no trash left out. But they got out and walked around the front yard with flashlights. "This ain't security," Delia said. "This is a warning." Shaq stared at the screen. Not just to them, to everybody. The next morning, he knocked on the new family's door, introduced himself, said welcome, asked if they'd gotten any HOA notices. The father, a man named Gerald, nodded slowly. "Yeah," said, "our porch light was too bright, that it didn't match community ambiance." Shaq offered a tired smile. "Yeah, they got a thing for ambiance lately." Gerald lowered his voice. "They came to my job, man. Brought up HOA concerns to my boss. I'm a school principal. They said I was non-compliant with neighborhood standards. My boss said it sounded strange, but I don't need that kind of noise." Shaq's smile faded. Later that week, at the neighborhood park, Shaq hosted a block gathering. Not a protest, just a grill out. Old school music, water balloons, kids laughing. He invited everybody. Didn't make speeches. Didn't wear a shirt that said anything. But people talked, and when the white cart rolled by once, just once, Shaq saw it from the corner of his eye. And this time, so did everyone else. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They just watched. And the fake officers drove on. Slower than ever, like the weight of that fake badge had just gotten a little heavier. She wasn't waving back. She was watching. Delia Harper lived in the corner house with the purple shutters and the front garden that looked like it had been plucked from an old Southern novel. Lavender vines, hand-painted birdhouses, ceramic frogs, and rows of sunflower stalks stood like sentries. Most folks in Willow Creek thought she was just a harmless old lady with too much time and a green thumb. But Shaq saw something different when he caught her eyes that morning across the hedgerow. He had just finished his second lap around the block, his head still buzzing with what he'd seen the day before. The kid on the bike, the fake HOA duo, the quiet way it all got brushed off like pollen on a windshield. He was thinking too much, heart too full, when he turned the corner and saw her, crouched near a rosebush, holding a tiny silver screwdriver, and adjusting what he realized wasn't a garden ornament but a camera. She looked up, saw him, and didn't flinch. "You're not just gardening, are you?" he asked, stepping closer. Delia smiled. "A small knowing thing. They think I'm senile," she said, standing up with her knees cracking softly. "That's my superpower." Shaq raised an eyebrow. Who does? The ones in the cart, she said. And whoever's pulling their strings. Shaq didn't say anything right away. Just stood there, arms folded across his chest, gaze steady. Delia turned toward her porch and waved for him to follow. Inside, her home smelled like lemon polish and fresh cookies, and every wall was lined with framed photos, black and white, color-faded Polaroids. A life lived in snapshots. She pointed to an armchair and shuffled to a small cabinet tucked under the staircase. She pulled out a weathered laptop and plugged in a drive. You ever seen something you couldn't unsee? She asked, clicking through folders labeled by date. More than once, Shaq answered. She tapped a video. It opened with grainy footage side angle from a birdhouse camera, time-stamped 5:27 a.m., 3 weeks ago. The white golf cart rolled into frame. The two officers stepped out, walked slowly across the lawn of the Simmons house. They didn't just circled the house like they were casing it, radios buzzing quietly. After a few minutes, they taped a notice to the door and left. Delia clicked again. Different day, different house, same cart, same men. This time, the video caught the tall one pulling out a measuring tape, checking the height of a fence. Only black families, she said, every single time. I checked. It's not a coincidence. Shaq leaned in, jaw tight. You've been recording all this? For months, Delia replied. Started after they came to me and said my front yard aesthetic was out of line. I've had this garden the same way for 20 years.
Why didn't you say anything to the HOA?
She looked at him. Baby, I am the HOA. Or was till they shuffled the board behind closed doors last fall. Said it was an administrative restructuring. I knew something was off. So I stopped talking and started watching. Shaq sat back stunned. They kicked you off? Not officially. Just stopped inviting me to meetings. Changed passwords. Disappeared contacts. It was subtle, like turning down the heat slowly in a pot. You don't know you're boiling till you're cooked. Shaq exhaled. They've been building something. They've been erasing something. Delia corrected. And now they're targeting anyone who doesn't fit their mold. Shaq looked around her house, eyes settling on a dusty plaque above her mantel that read, Truth doesn't whisper, it waits. You're not scared? He asked. Terrified, she said. But silence ain't my style. She handed him a second thumb drive. I make backups. Keep one in the house. One buried under the azaleas. Paranoid? Maybe. But I've lived through enough to know safety's a choice, not a guarantee. Shaq took the drive, turning it slowly in his palm. You think they're working alone? Delia shook her head. Someone higher up is giving them cover. Could be a board member. Could be someone with property interests. All I know is, they act like they're untouchable. Shaq stood up, that familiar feeling in his gut stirring again. Not rage, but clarity. The kind that told him the scoreboard had just changed. The game wasn't between him and two rogue actors. It was him against something systemic, something sneaky, sliding through the cracks of suburbia dressed up as policy. He turned to Delia. You okay with me using this? That's why I gave it to you, she said. But don't just use it. Understand it. Watch it. Feel it. Every clip. Every second. Know what you're carrying. That night, Shaq locked himself in his study. Turned off the lights, slid in the thumb drive, and pressed play. Clip after clip, week after week, patterns emerged like bruises under skin. Always early mornings. Always the same homes. The same phrasing on the fake warnings. Unauthorized fixtures. Non-compliant design. Excessive presence. That last one hit him hardest. What did that even mean? Too many people on a porch? Too many cars in a driveway? Or just too many black families in one place? He scribbled notes furiously. Mapped it all out. Names, dates, locations, even what time of day they hit which houses. It was a rhythm, a system, not random, not careless. When Mayra knocked on the door to say goodnight, he barely heard her. His mind was racing, heart pounding, not with fear but with purpose. The next morning, he returned to Delia's with coffee and fresh bagels. She met him on the porch with a smirk. I told you it'd keep you up. I couldn't stop watching, he said. You documented a damn blueprint. She nodded. Now you see why I kept quiet. Folks don't listen to old ladies with cameras, but they might listen to you. You want this public? He asked. Eventually, she said. But not yet. If we release it now, they'll scatter. We need names, connections. I can help you there. Shaq raised an eyebrow. You got friends? I got stories, Delia smiled. People owe me. People forget I was once the loudest voice in every board meeting. I can stir pots you didn't know existed. Over the next few days, they worked like detectives, quietly and methodically. Delia combed through old emails, board minutes, messages that mentioned a man named Dean Keller, someone who'd started showing up at HOA events, pitching security solutions. Shaq looked him up. Nothing official, no licensing. Just a website with a lot of buzzwords. Property integrity, neighborhood accountability, risk minimization. It all sounded like corporate jargon for control. Meanwhile, Shaq began talking to more neighbors, subtly checking who had been warned, who hadn't. He found patterns Delia hadn't even caught. The types of landscaping cited. The brands of vehicles noted. Even the tone of the letters varied. Harsher language for certain households. He shared some clips with a local journalist friend, Miles Hanley, without names, just to test the waters. Miles called back the next day, voice serious. Whatever you're sitting on is real, he said. I can smell it. But it's not a story yet. Not until you got accountability. We're working on it, Shaq said. Later that night, Delia called him. I just got a notice. What kind? He asked. They're citing me for excessive garden obstruction. Said my vines are causing visual hazard. Shaq laughed once. Bitter. You're the visual hazard. I'm taking it as a compliment. She said. Stay alert, he told her. We're getting close. And they were. They had footage. They had records. They had a list of affected families growing by the day. But more importantly, they had something else now. Trust. Word was spreading. Quietly. Carefully. Like resistance being born from silence. Shaq stood on his porch that weekend, watering his lawn like always. But now, when the white cart rolled by, it didn't just pass him. It slowed, stared, waited, and he stared back. He wasn't waving anymore. He was watching. File away, Shaq said flatly, closing the door halfway. But don't come back here with clipboards and pretend you're something you're not. Before the door shut completely, Mira peeked around the corner. Her eyes were wide, voice low. Dad, are they gonna fine us? Shaq walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. Not a chance. Lucille, standing at the counter with a dish towel in her hand, wasn't smiling. They came here bold, she said. They're escalating. Shaq nodded. And now they've made it personal. That afternoon, he called Delia. They came to my door. I figured they would, she replied. You're the one they can't scare with a fine. They tried, he said. Said I had to take down my panels and tear up my shed. Delia snorted. That's rich. Those panels saved us during last year's blackout. I'm going to track them, Shaq said. See how far this really goes. Delia hesitated on the other end. Be careful. They've started showing up at different hours. Not just mornings now. Evening walks. Random visits. Like they're hunting shadows. Shaq nodded to himself. Then I'll move quieter than them. That night, he pulled out an old GoPro he used to mount on his bike. Planted it behind his front porch light. Aimed toward the street. He added another one inside his SUV, angled at the road. He installed a third just under the garage. All of them fed into a private cloud system. One Delia had helped him set up after their last talk. By Thursday morning, he was already catching patterns. The white cart came down his street at 6:03 a.m., paused at the Evans house, another black family, then looped twice around the block, idling longer at homes with lawn ornaments, basketball hoops, porch furniture. None of those things were banned in the community rule, but they kept noticing them anyway. Friday afternoon, a neighbor named Caleb knocked on Shaq's door. Young guy, early 30s, former Navy, lived with his husband 3 doors down. He looked rattled. They came to my place yesterday, he said. Said my yard didn't meet visual symmetry guidelines. What the hell is that? Shaq invited him in. Caleb sat down, hands shaking slightly. They said if I didn't remove the pride flag from my porch, I'd be fined weekly. I asked for paperwork. They said it's part of new compliance considerations. None of it's written. Lucille handed Caleb a glass of tea. It's not about rules, she said. It's about intimidation. Shaq had seen it before, in locker rooms, in boardrooms, in backdoor meetings. People inventing structure just to silence difference. This was no longer about warnings. This was about control. He opened his laptop, brought up footage from the past week, and showed Caleb the patterns. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Caleb stared at the screen, jaw tightening. So what do? We build evidence, Shaq said. We expose the whole thing. Over the next few days, Shaq started walking every night again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Caleb joined him. Then Gerald. Then Lacey. Then Delia. Camera still swinging from her hip. They didn't call it a protest. They called it evening unity. But every time the cart rolled past, it had to do so in front of a dozen pairs of eyes. The intimidation started to falter. But the game wasn't over. On Monday, an envelope appeared in Shaq's mailbox. No return address. Inside was a formal-looking document, marked HOA compliance warning. Stage 2. It listed violations with no policy references. It cited obstruction of enforcement processes, and incitement of non-compliance behavior in other residents. Shawnee read it aloud, furious. They're trying to paint you as the problem. Shaq held the letter up to the light, eyes squinting at the faded watermark. It didn't match any HOA branding he'd seen. Then he looked closer and saw it. The signature line wasn't signed by a board member. It was signed N. Riley, security liaison. Riley, Shaq said slowly. That name again. He searched through Delia's notes. There it was. Nolan Riley had been at every HOA BBQ for the past year. Had pitched security upgrades. Had arranged community watch seminars. Had never once been elected. Shaq called Delia. We found our link. She responded without hesitation. Let's corner him. By Thursday, Shaq attended a closed HOA budget meeting, one he was technically not allowed to speak at, but that didn't stop him from showing up. He sat in the back, quiet, listening, and when Nolan Riley stood up to give his community safety report, Shaq did too. I got some footage to go with that, Shaq said, stepping forward. Nolan's eyes flicked toward the board, then back to Shaq. This isn't on the agenda. It is now, Shaq replied. He passed a folder to every board member, each filled with screenshots, timelines, and annotated video logs. The room went silent as they flipped through it. I don't need a badge to see abuse, Shaq said calmly, and I don't need permission to protect my neighbors. No one responded, not right away. But from the far end of the table, a board member named Elise cleared her throat. Mr. Riley, she said, we'll need to verify these claims immediately. You may want to step outside for a moment. Shaq didn't stay for the rest. He walked out into the fading evening sun, head high, blood calm, heart steady. He knew one thing for sure now. They had come for the wrong house. Delia had files. Dozens. But the truth was buried in what she couldn't capture. The morning was quiet, but the silence in Shaq's study wasn't peaceful. The windows were open to let in the spring air. But it didn't soften what they were looking at. Delia sat in a leather armchair, laptop balanced on her knees, fingers scrolling through date-stamped footage. Shaq leaned forward at the desk, his own screen lit up with the same files. Miles of video clips, notes scribbled in the margins of spreadsheets, timestamps tied to addresses and names. It looked like a detective's war room. They had more than enough to show a trend. Enough to draw a line, actually a dozen lines, between homes, marked black on the census, and homes repeatedly targeted for community guideline violations. But the footage wasn't always enough. Some things the cameras didn't catch, like tone, or threats whispered just out of mic range, or what wasn't said at all. Delia clicked on a clip from 3 weeks ago. This is the Jeffersons' place. They were warned about a fence obstruction. It's a bird bath. Shaq nodded, watching the video. 2 men from the cart walked up, circled the front lawn like they were assessing crime scene damage. One of them took a photo of the bird bath. The other scratched something on his clipboard. Then they taped a warning to the door and left. Delia turned to him. You know who's never gotten a warning? The Coopers. Shaq recognized the name. Retired white couple. Big American flag over their garage. Their front lawn looked like a jungle half the time. No footage on them at all, he asked. Nothing, she said. Not one stop. Even though their roof leaks onto the sidewalk and they keep old Christmas lights up through March. Shaq let out a dry chuckle. Guess community ambiance only applies when your skin tone's a certain shade. He closed the video and leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The pattern wasn't just about who got targeted. It was about who got ignored. Protection wasn't equal. It was selective, and the selection was no accident. But what haunted him most wasn't what they had. It was what they didn't. He opened a file labeled Incident 44, More Residents. It was a brief clip, just under a minute. The cart parked halfway down the block. A man in uniform, not an HOA shirt, walked into frame, clipboard under one arm. He passed the home of Daniel Moore, a Vietnam vet who'd moved in 6 months earlier with his daughter and 2 grandkids. He never made waves. Always smiled. Always waved. But that day his car had its tires slashed, and someone called the HOA tip line to say he had vandalized someone else's yard. There was no video of the slashing. Just the aftermath. The accusation. The fun. Shaq frowned. You still have the phone records for that tip? Delia nodded. Burner phone. Disconnected now. Nothing to trace. Shaq clicked play again. Watched the man walk away. Watched Mr. Moore step outside. See his tires. Look up and down the street. Then back at the house like he was afraid to even speak. No police report was ever filed, Delia said quietly. Shaq stared at the screen. Because he knew it wouldn't matter. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind that hums, full of emotion neither one needed to say out loud. Then Delia pulled a folder from her bag. This came in yesterday. Inside were screenshots. Screenshots not from her own cameras. They came from someone else. The angles were higher, wider, like they were watching from trees or rooftops. Some of them showed Shaq himself walking his dog. Others showed the HOA cart sitting idle for long periods in random spots. In one image, the 2 fake officers were standing near the back entrance of the HOA clubhouse, speaking to a man Shaq didn't recognize. These were emailed anonymously, Delia said. The subject line just said, "Keep looking." No name. No message. Shaq narrowed his eyes. So someone else is watching. Delia leaned forward. You think it's law enforcement? I think it's someone who doesn't want to be seen, Shaq said. But they know something. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a game with invisible opponents. Some throwing punches in daylight, others hiding behind curtains and tinted windows. He thought about the unmarked cruiser he'd seen parked outside the community twice in the past week. Always empty. He thought about how nobody ever answered when he called the listed number for the HOA's new enforcement wing. He thought about the silence that followed every formal inquiry he sent to the board. Somebody was letting this happen. Somebody with just enough power to make sure it stayed unofficial. Later that day, Shaq met with Miles Hanley, the journalist he'd been quietly feeding information to. They sat at an old diner just outside the gates of Willow Creek. Neutral ground. You're sitting on the kind of story that burns careers, Miles said after reviewing a packet. Shaq had handed him. But the Moore case? That's the piece that cuts deepest. Shaq nodded. And it's the piece we can't fully prove. Miles chewed on his bottom lip. You need a voice. Someone inside who'll talk. Shaq leaned in. I think we already have one. They're just not ready. Back at home, Shaq spent the evening reviewing the anonymous screenshots again. One of them caught his attention, more than the others. In it, the taller enforcer, the one who always looked like he was chewing on something bitter, was shaking hands with a man outside the clubhouse. The handshake wasn't casual. It was formal, like they were sealing a deal. He enlarged the image, stared at the man's face. Then it clicked. Nolan Riley, Shaq muttered. The same name that had been on the stage 2 compliance warning in his mailbox. The same name Delia had flagged weeks ago. But this was the first time Shaq had a face. He sent the image to Delia with a short message. This is him. Her reply came within 2 minutes. Yes. That's Riley. And the man with him? That's Councilman Darrow's assistant. Shaq felt his chest tighten. Darrow was a local politician. He'd shaken hands with him at a charity fundraiser last year. Smooth talker. Big smile. The kind who loved making statements about unity but never showed up when it counted. Suddenly, this wasn't just about an HOA overstepping. This was about a network. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked outside to clear his head. The neighborhood was bathed in that soft late dusk glow. Porch lights flickered on one by one. Kids were riding bikes, the breeze gentle, but beneath that perfect calm, Shaq could feel the tension hanging in the air like static. As he turned the corner near the park, he saw the cart again, parked empty. No enforcers in sight, just the vehicle. Like it was left there to remind people. Someone was always nearby, but Shaq didn't feel intimidated. Not anymore. He walked past it, slow and deliberate. He knew they were close to something now. The data, the footage, the connections, they were forming a wall of truth, and the ones behind all this could feel it closing in. The only question was, who would blink first? Back home, He found Miara in the living room, with Lucille. They were laughing at a rerun of Family Feud. Shaq sat beside them, silent for a long time. Lucille looked at him sideways. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Worse," he said. "I saw a lie, dressed up like Law." She gave a slow nod. "You're getting close, huh? Close enough they're starting to get sloppy." Lucille stood, patted his shoulder. "Then be careful. Sloppy men do reckless things when they start losing control." Shaq didn't answer. He was already thinking 5 steps ahead. That night, as he reviewed one last clip before bed, something clicked. A single frame. One of the anonymous screenshots had caught part of a license plate in the background. He zoomed in, enhanced it, ran the number through a public database. It belonged to a city contractor's vehicle, registered under the Department of Code Enforcement. Shaq's stomach turned. This wasn't just rogue volunteers anymore. This was policy piggybacking on prejudice. And the cameras, for all their angles, had only scratched the surface. Shaq's expression didn't change. "We're not obligated to disclose complainant identities," the shorter one said, fingers twitching near his waist. Shaq clocked the movement. Ada, sensing it too, took a small step back. "Then you're not obligated to be on this property," Shaq replied, firm but level. "You're not HOA, and you damn sure aren't law enforcement." The tall one's face twitched. "You're escalating." Shaq took one step forward, palms open. "No. I'm standing in my neighborhood, fixing a neighbor's mailbox. If that's a crime, go ahead and call it in." The shorter man reached for his belt, where a black holster sat clipped beside a fake radio. His fingers grazed the grip of a compact pistol. Shaq saw it, and in that moment, the world stilled. Ada gasped, her hand going to her chest. "You brought a gun?" she whispered, voice trembling. Shaq raised both hands, toolbox on the ground beside him. "Easy. Don't do something stupid."
The shorter one's hand hovered, uncertain. The taller man hissed through clenched teeth. "Keep your hands where we can see them."
"I'm 7'1" and holding air," Shaq said calmly. "You think I'm hiding something?" "Back up," the short one barked, voice cracking just slightly. The weapon was half drawn now, safety still on, but his grip shook like a boy trying to hold a secret too long. And from the trees behind them, a lens zoomed quietly. They didn't know they were being watched. Not by Delia's cameras, not by a neighbor with a cell phone, but by someone else entirely. 2 blocks over, parked just outside the main entrance to Willow Creek, an unmarked SUV idled. Inside, a plainclothes officer stared at a live stream on a dashboard monitor. He adjusted the angle, turned up the sound. His radio chirped softly. "Unit 3. Are we green to move?" "Negative," came the voice. "Stand by. Keep eyes." In real time, they were watching what would later be known as the flashpoint. Shaq hadn't moved. His hands were still up, his voice still calm. But his eyes had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that meant he was calculating every possible outcome, every angle, every risk. Not for him. For Ada. For the kids on the sidewalk, across the street, watching with frozen popsicles in their hands. For Mara, who would hear about this before the sun set. "You pull that," Shaq said evenly. "You'll regret it for the rest of your life." The taller man moved suddenly, not to stop his partner, but to step in front of him. "We're filing a formal safety report," he snapped. "You've compromised neighborhood order." "You don't write reports," Shaq shot back. "You write threats." He turned to Ada slowly. "You okay?" She nodded, tears shining in her eyes but not falling. "I'm fine. I'm not scared of ghosts in uniforms." Shaq bent down, picked up his toolbox, and started walking away. The shorter man didn't holster the weapon until Shaq was almost 20 feet down the sidewalk. The entire encounter lasted 4 minutes. By the time Shaq reached his porch, his phone buzzed. A text from Delia. "I got it." Every second. Then another one, from a number he didn't recognize. "We saw everything. We need to talk." Shaq stared at it, heart pounding now, not from fear but adrenaline. The kind that comes after the moment passes, when your body realizes what almost was. Inside the house, Lucille met him with her arms crossed and fury in her eyes. "They drew on you?" she said, voice low. "Didn't point it, but yeah," Shaq answered. Mimura was standing behind her, face pale. "Why would they do that? You weren't even..." Shaq shook his head. "Because that's what people do when they mistake authority for permission." He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he met Delia just before midnight, in her living room, They reviewed the footage frame by frame. The gun, the stance, the angle, the badge glinting in the sun, the unspoken violence that danced so close, it made the air taste metallic. Delia's voice was a whisper. That's attempted intimidation with a weapon. Shaq nodded. But they'll say it was precautionary. Protocol. A misunderstanding. Not when we release this, she said. Not when people see it.
No, Shaq replied, we're not releasing it yet.
Delia blinked. Why not? Because someone else saw it too. Someone who just reached out. She looked at him sideways. The police? I think so, Shaq said. And if they've been watching, it means we're not the only ones who know the game being played. He didn't tell her how close he'd come to losing his composure. How his body had tensed when the holster flashed. How for 1 second he'd felt something deep and primal rise in him. Not anger, but grief. The kind that comes from knowing your life is always one false move, from being misunderstood into a headline. The next morning, a manila envelope appeared on Shaq's porch. No stamp, no label, just tucked under the mat. Inside were stills. Official-looking ones. Screenshots from a body cam, not Delia's angles. Different timestamp. Clean audio transcript. And a note, typed, unsigned. Not all badges are fakes. Some of us still care. Shaq looked out at the street, empty and glowing under the early morning sun. Somewhere out there, a real cop had watched the same moment unfold, and instead of drawing a weapon, they'd drawn a line. And that line had just been crossed. The footage dropped, and the internet exploded. But Shaq didn't feel like a hero. He felt broken. It happened on a Monday morning. No fanfare, no press release. Just a quiet upload to a private account on a site that thrives on truth no one wants to say out loud. Delia had handled it. She sent the link to a local journalist and one trusted national contact. Within hours it caught fire. The video was simple. No dramatic music, no edits, just a clear view from 2 angles. One from Delia's hedgerow cam, and another unknown source. Zoomed in, military precise, the gun visible, the hand trembling, the tension loud in the silence. Shaq, standing there, unarmed, calm, hands raised. The enforcer, eyes jittery, safety still on but threatening all the same. The headline came fast. HOA vigilantes confront Shaquille O'Neal at gunpoint. Real cop records the moment. Then came the hashtags. Big Shaq stays calm. Fake badge. Real gun. Stand down. Not up. Within 24 hours, the video had 3.2 million views. By Wednesday it had passed 10. TV anchors debated it. Panelists argued about overreach, racism, private security. Some praised Shaq for his restraint. Others questioned the presence of neighborhood surveillance. A few, from corners that always grumbled when truths got loud, called it blown out of proportion. But none of it made Shaq feel seen or safe. He stood in his living room while his phone buzzed nonstop. Texts, DMs, voicemails, people from high school, reporters, former teammates, senators. But every time he tried to reply, his fingers froze. Because this wasn't a highlight reel. This wasn't about sportsmanship or legacy. It was about survival. About fear. About a moment that could have gone another way. And about what it meant that millions of people had to see it to believe it. Mara was the first to really say it out loud. They were eating dinner. Shawnee had made chicken parm. One of those meals that usually kept the world soft and safe for a little while. But that night, the air around the table was too loud with what no one wanted to say. Miara pushed her plate aside. They're posting stuff about me. Shaq looked up. Who is? She shrugged. Eyes glassy. People. Randoms. Saying I'm spoiled. That I deserved it. That you're just pulling some publicity stunt. Shawnee put her fork down. What? Miyamara pulled out her phone. The screen showed a comment thread. Nasty and personal. Mentions of Shaq's money, their family, Mira's school, even their dog. Shaq took the phone, jaw clenching. He wanted to crush it in his hand. But instead he set it down gently. Shawnee leaned in, voice tight. This is why I told you not to let it go public. You knew it would turn into a circus. It wasn't supposed to be this, Shaq said. It was supposed to be a wake-up call. Proof. And now what, she asked. You changed the world? Or just lit a match under your own house? That one hurt. Because she wasn't wrong. He didn't sleep that night. Instead he sat outside on the porch with Duke curled at his feet, and the sky black above him. Occasionally headlights passed through the trees near the entrance. He didn't flinch, but he watched every one. At 2:12 a.m., he got a message from an unknown number. You made a mistake. Stay in your lane. He showed it to Delia the next morning. She didn't blink. They're scared. That's what this is. Fear always barks loudest right before it gets put down. They're not scared enough to stop, Shaq said. They're just quieter about it now. Delia poured coffee into 2 mugs, handed one over. Do you regret releasing it? He didn't answer right away. No, he said finally. I regret that it had to exist. The fallout came fast, faster than Shaq expected. By Friday, the HOA board issued a statement. Dry, sterile, designed by lawyers. The actions of unauthorized security individuals do not reflect the values of our community. They claimed no knowledge of the weapon, no endorsement of patrols, no approval of any formal enforcement program. The officers disappeared, cart abandoned, no names, no trace. But that didn't mean they were gone. Delia had cameras, and the night after the video went viral, one of them caught a figure slinking through her side yard. No mask, just a hoodie and gloves. Didn't take anything, just looked into the lens, then left. She texted Shaq a screenshot. They want us to know they're still watching. Shaq showed it to his contact, Detective Ray Donner, the same man who'd been watching them through the other lens that day. Ray met Shaq in a parking lot outside a hardware store. Neutral ground. Windows rolled up. No uniforms. We've been watching the HOA for a while, Ray said. Quiet case. Money laundering. Illegal property flipping. We were close. Then they scattered. Shaq leaned forward. Who's they? Ray hesitated. It's not just volunteers, it's contractors. Political donors. A developer named Wes Hanford has been slowly trying to acquire homes in minority-occupied areas of high-value neighborhoods. The HOA was his front. Shaq exhaled slowly. And the men with the clipboards. On Hanford's payroll, Ray confirmed. Unofficial hires. Brought in to agitate, to document, to fine, to pressure people out. But the gun wasn't part of the plan. That was fear. That was exposure. That gave us our angle. Shaq folded his hands. Then what happens now? We build a case. But we need you to stay quiet for a while. Shaq smiled sadly. That ship sailed. Ray didn't argue. Just passed him a flash drive. Use this wisely. It'll help. Back home, Shaq watched the footage Ray had shared. New angles, overhead surveillance, phone taps, meetings between Riley and city contractors. It was a conspiracy, built in silence, legal on paper, dirty in the shadows. He showed it to Shawnee that night. She didn't say much, just rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, I'm tired of being scared. Shaq kissed her forehead. Me too. But he wasn't done. He met with Miles Hanley, the journalist, one more time. Gave him the drive, the context, the full story. Miles asked him, Are you ready for what happens next? Shaq looked him dead in the eye. Going viral was never the goal. Justice was. And in that moment, he stopped feeling like a target and started feeling like a weapon. Not of violence, but of truth. Because you've got more power than we do, Ray said plainly. They fear exposure more than arrest. You going public cracked the shell. Now I need your help getting inside. Shaq let the folder rest on his lap, eyes scanning the name again. Wes Hanford. A name with no face yet, just signatures on shady deals. Ray continued. Delia Harper has been critical. Her footage gives us the groundwork. Your presence adds heat, but there's someone still inside the HOA who's been quietly helping Hanford. We've been narrowing it down. Who? Shaq asked. Ray leaned back. We think it's Dana Ellis. She's the secretary of the board. Always low profile, always neutral. But she's been making motions that redirect enforcement budgets. She approved the hiring of a security consultant, unilaterally. Shaq blinked. No vote? None recorded. We found emails from her office connecting her to Hanford's legal rep. I can't arrest on that, but if we catch her talking to the enforcers off record, it becomes a conspiracy. Shaq felt his fists tighten. You want to bait her. I want to flush her out, Ray said. And I think you're the one who can do it. Shaq wasn't eager to be used. He'd spent his life being the one to protect, not provoke. But this wasn't just his story anymore. It was Mira's future. It was every neighbor who'd been quietly punished for existing. He gave a slow nod. Let's do it. The next day, Shaq requested a private sit-down with Dana Ellis under the pretense of clearing the air. He told her he wanted to put the viral incident behind them, move forward constructively. They met at a neutral cafe on the edge of town. She arrived in a beige pantsuit, smile too wide, eyes darting. She played cordial, apologetic, claimed she didn't know about the enforcers, insisted they weren't authorized. "I had no idea they were carrying firearms," she said, sipping from a straw like she didn't just lie through her teeth. Shaq played it cool. "I figured it was a misunderstanding. But I'd like to help the board tighten oversight. Maybe help fund some legitimate security measures." Dana's eyes lit up, just briefly. "That's incredibly generous of you, Mr. O'Neal."
You can call me Shaq, he said with a grin.
Across the street, Ray sat in an unmarked van, listening through a mic planted in Shaq's collar button. Dana leaned forward. "If you're serious about helping, there's a redevelopment initiative we've been discussing internally. We want to modernize the neighborhood. Smart homes, new amenities, cleaner energy. Hanford's company has been interested in partnering." Shaq tilted his head. "Hanford? Wiz Hanford," she said without blinking. "He's a longtime supporter of community development. He could be very helpful if we smooth out some of the resistance." There it was. Ray whispered into his recorder. "We got her." Dana kept talking, oblivious. "We're targeting specific homes for early buyouts. Nothing forceful, just incentive-based relocation. You understand? People sometimes need a push." Shaq kept his smile glued on. Of course, but inside he felt sick. By the time the meeting ended, Ray had enough. They had Dana, on tape admitting knowledge, name-dropping Hanford, admitting the relocation strategy. It wasn't a full confession, but it was enough to link her to the scheme. That evening, Shaq met Delia at her garden. He told her everything. She didn't speak for a long time, just plucked dead petals from a stem with quiet precision. "They always had someone inside," she said. "I knew it. You could feel it in the way the meeting shifted, the way decisions were made before questions were asked." Shaq leaned on the porch railing. "Now we've got proof." "And what do we do with it?" Delia asked. Shaq stared into the dusk. "We build the case, let Ray take it to the DA. Then we burn the whole lie down, publicly." Delia nodded, and for the first time in weeks, her eyes held something close to hope. The next morning, Shaq received a package, no return address. Inside was a single key and a typed note. Unit 6B. Self-storage off Maple Ave. The rest of the story is there. He stared at it, heart steady, mind sharp.
The walls were finally cracking.
And behind them, the real truth waited. Sometimes the answers live in places we never meant to revisit. The envelope had no return address, no stamp, and no reason to be on Shaq's kitchen counter. It wasn't handed to him, wasn't slid under a door. It simply appeared, resting atop a stack of bills and school flyers like it belonged there. Shaq picked it up, heavy with suspicion. The paper was aged, not dusty, but worn soft like it had been touched 100 times before. The handwriting on the front was careful. All caps, firm. To Shaquille O'Neal, Willow Creek. Inside was a single page, folded twice, the kind of fold that left creases with memory. The letter began. "If you're reading this, I was right. The rot didn't die, it just changed clothes." Shaq froze. He knew that voice even without hearing it. Thomas Breyer. Old Man Thomas, the neighborhood's first black homeowner. A war vet, a history buff, a man who spent afternoons in his rocking chair watching the world with eyes that caught more than they ever revealed. He died 2 years ago, a quiet funeral, and not many attendees. People thought he was bitter, grumpy. But Shaq had known different. They'd spoken often. About the neighborhood, about history, about warnings that went unheard.
The letter continued.
In 2016, I found documents, real ones, proof that this HOA was just a shell built over something else. Hanford had already started buying people. I told them at the meeting. Nobody listened. Then the citation started. So I collected everything and locked it away. I knew someday they'd go too far, and someone like you would come along. Not loud, but right. At the bottom of the page was a small notation. Unit 6B, Willow Storage, code. Shaq read the letter twice, then a third time. His hands didn't shake, but his breath slowed. It was like reaching into the dirt and finding bones everyone else swore weren't there. By mid-morning, he and Ray Donner stood in front of the beige steel door of Unit 6B. The facility was older, forgotten by modern developers, tucked behind a line of auto repair shops and a pawn store. Shaq entered the code. The door rolled open with a groan. Inside, it wasn't chaos. It was careful. A single metal file cabinet, a portable safe, 2 cardboard boxes, a folding chair, and a crate of old VHS tapes. Their labels written in that same blocky hand: Board Minimals D15, Street Cam, Surveillance B Oct. Ray stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning. He was building a case before we even knew there was a case. Shaq approached the file cabinet and opened the top drawer. Folders, labeled, dated, names, addresses, financial statements, campaign donations, internal HOA emails, printed out and highlighted, and under it all, a list title typed in bold: Target Homes for Transfer, Phase 1. It was chilling. Ray opened the safe next. Inside were USB drives, a burner phone, and a sealed envelope marked for law enforcement only. He handed it to Shaq. They stood in silence as they processed the weight of it all. Breyer wasn't just right, Ray finally said. He was ahead of us all. One folder caught Shaq's eye. Ellis PAC contributions. Inside were copies of checks, emails, dinner receipts, all tied to Dana Ellis, the HOA board secretary they'd recently confirmed as a central figure. Each document linked her to political action committees affiliated with Wes Hanford's real estate empire. There was even a signed agreement to push certain redevelopment incentives at the county level. Ray's jaw tightened. This ties local government into it. This isn't just about your neighborhood anymore. This is a pipeline. Shaq exhaled. Slowly. We take it up. They boxed everything and transported it to the county attorney's office under escort. Ray made the call to his internal contact while Shaq drove in silence, his fingers tapping the steering wheel in a slow, deliberate rhythm. He felt like a man carrying a bomb built from paper. The county attorney, Lena Cortez, met them in her office late that afternoon. She was sharp, direct, and didn't blink once as she read through the files. Her team of investigators stood behind her, whispering and flipping pages with the urgency of people realizing they were sitting on a grenade. "You understand what you've brought me?" she asked. Shaq nodded. A machine, built to displace people quietly. Cortez sat back in her chair. "We can pursue criminal charges, fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations. But this will take time, and they'll fight. They'll spin it as overreach, as misinterpretation." Ray leaned forward. "You have witnesses. You have whistleblowers. You have motive, method, and evidence." Cortez folded her hands. "Then we go public." Carefully, she agreed to draft a formal statement within the week, beginning a multi-agency investigation into Willow Path Holdings, the HOA board, and its financial links to political offices. Outside the courthouse, Shaq leaned against the brick wall, staring out across the plaza. Ray lit a cigarette, offered him one. Shaq shook his head. "Breyer," Shaq said quietly, "knew this would all come back around, but he also knew it wouldn't happen fast." Ray took a drag. The good ones never expect fast. Just right. That night, back home, Shaq sat with Mira on the porch. She was scrolling through her phone, face pinched. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the screen. "They're talking about you again. Some people think you made it all up." Shaq looked out into the dark. "People think a lot of things when the truth makes them uncomfortable." She turned to him. "Did it scare you? When the gun came out?" He didn't lie. Mira leaned her head on his shoulder. "You didn't look scared." "I've had practice," he said softly. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need fixing, just holding. Later, Lucille came out with 3 cups of hot tea. She didn't say anything, just handed them over and sat beside them. "Thomas would be proud," she said after a moment. "You did what he couldn't." "I didn't do it alone," Shaq said. "He started it. Delia kept it going. Ray lit the fuse." Lucille smiled. "But you carried it through fire." The next morning, as the sun rose and mist curled low over the street, a moving truck parked in front of Dana Ellis's home. She didn't wave as she packed boxes. No one helped her. People watched from behind curtains. Delia snapped a photo and sent it to Shaq with a single line. "One down." But Shaq didn't celebrate. Not yet. He knew the real victory wasn't in a resignation or an indictment. It was in the system learning to fear the people it once ignored. And that kind of change, it was just beginning. "He still waves," But now, the whole street waves back. 3 months had passed since the letter with no stamp, since the boxes in the storage unit blew the lid off a quiet scandal engineered to look like community upkeep. It felt longer, not in a painful way, but in the kind of way you feel when the seasons change, and everything starts to breathe different. Willow Creek didn't look the same, and neither did the people living in it. The fake HOA enforcers were now mugshots on local news broadcasts, cuffed and grim in their navy blue polos. Wes Hanford's shell company, Willow Path Holdings, had been exposed for fraud and racketeering, and his real estate empire was unraveling in real time. Investigators uncovered at least 4 other neighborhoods affected by similar schemes. Lawsuits stacked, subpoenas followed. Dana Ellis had resigned quietly, but was named as a key figure in the county's criminal complaint. Prosecutors had enough to pursue charges. Her home was up for sale before the court date had even been set. Delia Harper, the woman with the cameras in her flower pots, now had a weekly editorial column in the local paper. She didn't write like a politician. She wrote like a neighbor, and people read every word. Shaq's testimony, given under oath in a packed courtroom, was more than powerful. It was seismic, not because he was a celebrity, but because he told the truth with a calm that carried weight. No embellishments, just a clear recollection of every warning taped to his door, every quiet violation witnessed, every line crossed when a weapon entered the frame, and nearly changed the course of everything. When he left the courtroom that day, people outside clapped. He didn't wave. He just nodded, hand over heart. The media had tried to spin it in every direction. Shaq the activist, Shaq saves suburbia, basketball legend battles corruption. But none of those labels stuck. Because what had happened wasn't a headline. It was a neighborhood deciding it was done pretending. Shawnee had watched the entire trial from the front row, her hand never once leaving Miura's. And when the closing statements ended, when the gavel finally fell and the charges became official, Miura turned to her father and whispered, "You did it, Dad." But Shaq had shaken his head gently and said, "We did." In the weeks that followed, changes swept through Willow Creek like spring after a long winter. The HOA board was restructured completely. An open vote was held at the community center, real ballots, real transparency. People showed up, people who'd never spoken at meetings before, who'd once kept their heads down, now walked in with their shoulders back. Shaq didn't run for anything. He didn't want a title. But he helped recruit the new board, a teacher, a retired firefighter, a nurse, a single mother, and even a teenager named Eli, who represented the youth of the neighborhood. Their first motion, to remove all arbitrary violation protocols and ban unlicensed security from all HOA involvement. Their second, mandatory diversity and ethics training for all board members. The third motion passed unanimously, renamed the Central Park Pavilion, after Thomas Breyer. Shaq was there for that unveiling. He didn't give a speech. Delia did. And when she said, "This neighborhood stood on the shoulders of a man who planted seeds nobody watered until it was almost too late," there wasn't a dry eye in sight. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Shaq went back to his old routine. He stood in his driveway with a hose in one hand, watering the same immaculate lawn he always had, wearing an old Suns t-shirt, Duke lying in the shade near his sneakers. This time, when he waved, people waved back, not just out of politeness, but with recognition. Some honked, some stopped to chat. One neighbor brought a coffee, another thanked him for helping their father keep his home. Shaq didn't bask in it. He just smiled and kept watering. Amira rode by on her bike later that afternoon, earbuds in, coasting smooth with confidence. Shaq hadn't seen in months. No flinch at corners. No anxious glances over her shoulder. Just a girl being a kid again. He watched her until she rounded the corner, heart finally loosening in his chest. Inside the house, Lucille was finishing a crossword and sipping mint tea. She didn't say anything when Shaq walked in, just looked at him over her glasses with that proud, quiet look she'd mastered back when he was still getting teased for missing free throws. He sat down beside her. "Feel different now?" She smiled. "Feels right." Shawnee came in next, keys jangling, having just finished a meeting with the new HOA treasurer. She kissed his cheek and flopped onto the couch. "They're talking about installing community gardens," she said. "Delia's already volunteering." Shaq chuckled. "Of course she is. Wants to plant tomatoes and surveillance cameras." Shawnee added with a grin. They all laughed. That night, they hosted a backyard gathering. Unofficial, unstructured, just neighbors talking like neighbors again. Lacey brought cookies. Gerald brought his guitar. Caleb brought his husband, and made jokes all night. No one talked about the incident. No one brought up the video. It was there, of course. In the air, in the glances, in the way people checked on each other more now. But it wasn't the centerpiece. Healing had started. Not erasing, just layering over the cracks with something stronger. As the sun dipped behind the rooftops, and the fairy lights strung over the fence started to glow, Shaq stood by the grill flipping burgers. He was mid-flip when Eli, the new youth board member, approached. "Hey, Mr. O'Neal," Eli said. "We were talking about doing a documentary. Not about the incident, but about what came after. The organizing, the rebuilding. Think you'd be in it?" Shaq thought for a moment, then nodded. "Only if I'm not the star." Eli grinned. "Deal." Later, when the party died down, and the last guest waved goodbye under the porch lights, Shaq sat on the steps and looked out over the street. It looked the same, but it felt brand new. Duke lay at his feet. Mimera dozed inside. Lucille was reading. Shawnee was cleaning up the last of the dishes, humming something old and soulful. Shaq closed his eyes and breathed in deep. It wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about going viral. It was about fighting for the right to belong. Loudly, peacefully, persistently. He'd seen what fear looked like in a kid's eyes. He'd seen what silence cost a man like Breyer. He'd watched power try to disguise itself in petty rules and fake authority. But now, he saw the future. A little cracked. A little messy. But finally in the hands of the people who lived it. He stood up slowly, stretched and walked to the edge of the lawn. A car passed. He waved. They waved back. If this story struck something in you, don't scroll past it. Talk to your neighbors. Question the quiet rules. Watch who's really watching. Because change doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts on porches. And sometimes, the loudest kind of justice is just paying attention. Stay awake. Stay grounded. The next Shaq might live on your street.